Here's Ben Edwards.
Thank you very much, Matt. Yeah, we're looking forward to the start of the free practice session to get underway here in the Canadian race. Jacques Villeneuve, the man on home territory on the circuit, Gilles Villeneuve. John, it is a track that sees a lot of chicanes, lots of straights, lots of high speed to deal with. Quite hard on the mechanics of the car, isn't it?
Yes, it is. In fact, this is probably one of the toughest circuits for brakes in particular, but gearboxes as well. Also, fuel consumption very high in relation to other races. And those cars that got larger fuel tanks are able then to have a slightly better opportunity to go much deeper into a race. Fundamentally, it's a one pit stop race, but you never know what's going to happen because of the increased grip that cars are going to benefit from the tire war going on between Michelin and Bridgestone. And also, of course, on gearboxes, they take a real hammering because every time you have to brake down into a hairpin bend, you're really nailing those brakes and the transmission's getting wound up. So all the way down from 7th to 1st gear, then back up again, and that's happening twice a lap, and it is very, very demanding mechanically on a car, and corresponding the fuel consumption goes up and down rapidly.
Indeed. Well, we shall watch to see how much work the teams are putting into the setups, particularly with brake cooling, as we dive in and out of the pit garages over the course of the weekend. Our coverage here going right into the garages and giving us a good close-up view often of the suspension components and the area around those front discs, where lots of cooling will be required to get the very best from the cars over the weekend. There we are inside the Ferrari pit at the moment, and you have to say, coming to this race, that Ferrari should be in very good shape. They were beaten in Monaco, brilliant drive from David Coulthard, great teamwork from McLaren, but this weekend you have to say that the pendulum is likely to swing back in Ferrari's favour. This track in some ways a little bit like Imola, with its sequence of chicanes and a lot of heavy braking, lots of high-speed work on the straights as well. And of course, if you remember back to Imola, it was a dominant 1-2 performance for Ferrari on that occasion. Looks like it's going to be Jaguar that will be first out onto the track. Eddie Irvine down at the end of the pit lane, ready to open up proceedings, and this new pit lane exit that brings them out now, as you can see, actually halfway through the center set of corners. The first left-right, they used to come in just before the corners, now joining right in the middle of it.
Yes, indeed, very much better, I must say, than what we've had in the past. And if you think back to, I think it was 97, 98, when Michael Schumacher exited the pits as Heinz-Harald Frentzen was coming down in the Williams, and Michael just threw straight out of the pits, straight onto the racing line, and forced Frentzen off the track into an accident. And it was one of those issues which I think truly could have been addressed very much sooner than 2002. Nevertheless, it's now been accomplished, and hopefully that will make a big difference for those cars exiting pit lane and those that are on track, particularly when it comes to qualifying, because you could play a little bit of games with people who you thought were about to start a very quick lap into that sequence of turns 1 and turn 2.
So Eddie Irvine on track then. We were talking about him a moment ago. John, you were talking about the prospects of him not being at Jaguar next year, and there's been a lot of stories, as you mentioned, about him possibly moving to Jordan. Coming down to the hairpin here, they've actually moved this hairpin back a little bit, gives it a bit more runoff on the outside effectively. I wonder if that will mean that people will be prepared to attack a bit more into there to overtake.
Well, they're coming out of a long left curve, and then they're going to be really on the brakes that much quicker than they would have done previously. But what they've also been able to do is, in that extra runoff area, they've laid it down on that very high grip tarmac, which is being seen more and more around European circuits, instead of having gravel. And we've seen people getting into the gravel trap previously down to that hairpin bend, to remove the car to do it safely. So hopefully this will see an improvement for everybody, not least of all for the drivers.
So Coulthard, the star of Monaco, bringing himself up to 4th place in the World Championship after the victory that he enjoyed there, and now looking forward to this race in Montreal. He's always gone well on the Canadian circuit, but as we've heard, perhaps McLaren not having a package that will be quite as competitive here this weekend. Here's the man that won here last year, Ralf Schumacher. The Williams BMW package was definitely the one to have here 12 months ago, but we've seen how strong the Ferrari is this year, and we have to wonder whether the modifications that Williams have made, and there are a number on the car this weekend. Williams have come up with a lot of little additions and changes, particularly around the back end of the car. I wonder if that's going to be enough for them.
Well, certainly horsepower isn't a problem with the BMW engine. They were the quickest car here last year, down the straight 207 miles an hour, but of course they benefited from the Michelin tyre last year. Michelin really came into its own on this circuit. I think this year the gap between the two tyre companies here is probably going to be very, very much reduced. And looking at Michael Schumacher just having a nervous yawn, but completely relaxed, composed, in no rush out. He knows that when he does eventually go out and track in his Ferrari, they're going to be right on the money in terms of pace, and of course Ferrari reliability being what it is, it's nice to know you've got that in your back pocket as well. But nevertheless, Williams have made some changes. I've also learned, again, the same journalist that gave me that insight into Jaguar, that there is changes to the fuel system, and I suspect that's more about how the engine itself operates, and they're expected to see a bit of a leap in horsepower with BMW, so that's something to keep an eye on throughout the weekend.
Yes, and indeed David Coulthard saying that there's a little bit of a power hike from Mercedes this weekend that he's looking forward to using. They certainly could do with that. Listening into a little bit of team radio, we'll be hearing a bit of this as we go through the weekend, and we'll try and go quiet when we hear it. We don't get any notice, so we'll try and shut up when we hear the radios. At the moment, all they're really doing is checking their radio communications to make sure that driver can be heard back in the pits, and likewise he can hear the engineer speaking to him. Jenson Button bringing his Renault back into the pits. He's had a pretty strong start to the season, a bit of reliability problems that have caused him to not score as many points.
I think he's ordering a drink, wouldn't you?
Pretty relaxed looking, wanting his other crash helmet. That's an interesting comment straight away.
Yes, maybe just simply he's got another helmet, a new one that he wants to run, and doing it in a session such as this early in the session would be the ideal time to do it. But going back to those sort of rumours about Button and Jaguar, that is what Jaguar, that's their wish list. It isn't necessarily Button's wish list, and he's already expressed a desire to continue with the Renault team into the future. So the rumour mill has started relatively early, and the one thing that appears to be fairly clear is that Eddie Irvine isn't on the top of Jaguar's wish list. Not to say that Eddie will not be driving a Jaguar next year, but they're looking at young drivers. They had Alonso, Lautner and James Courtney testing at Silverstone last week, and it was Fernando Alonso who really did a very strong job. And of course the thought of having two Spanish drivers driving for Jaguar in the future may not necessarily be the most attractive alternative, but Alonso was outstanding. He probably can be signed on a long-term contract, and he probably wouldn't cost as much as Irvine's costing the team over the last 3 years.
Well, as you say, Alonso was pretty impressive in that test at Silverstone just last week, so we'll watch that with interest. He's not being allowed to talk about it, apparently. He's not really allowed to say anything about it. Renault have him under contract as their test driver, and for the moment, they're keeping very quiet indeed. Heinz-Harald Frentzen on track in the Arrows, scored another point last time out in Monaco, and that's certainly good news for the team. They've got some new money coming into the team as well, which Tom Walkinshaw has been talking about. So Arrows hopefully on the way up. BAR having a bit of a struggle this season, still not scoring any points in this year's World Championship. Peter, I think you're down near that BAR pit, aren't you, right now?
I am indeed, Ben, yes. Big smiles down here because, as you can see, they've just taken off the engine cover from Olivier Panis's BAR, and very similar to that on the Williams. It is too. This is new for this race, of course. No surprise that it's a Williams copy because, of course, this is the first real move made by Jeff Willis, or Jeffrey, I think, as we're supposed to call him now. Jeffrey Willis, the ex-Williams aerodynamicist. So new bodywork, but the Williams guys are just laughing their heads off, really, because it's almost interchangeable with that on their car.
Well, it's good to see, isn't it? As you say, Jeffrey Willis moving over from Williams to BAR, and, well, you have to understand that he's going to stick with much the same sort of work that he's been doing at Williams in recent years. But the interesting thing to see, will this improve BAR's fortunes, John? They have had such a struggle to the start of this season. It's
been very tough indeed, and in fact David Richards, the team principal at BAR, spent a fortune on his 50th birthday last weekend, and nevertheless David is here and keeping an eye on the progress. And of course it's understandable that Jeff Willis, who has come from Williams, would follow the philosophy that Williams have gone down. And of course what works in a Williams, and obviously it does work in the Williams because they've got more downforce than the BAR up until this event this weekend. So we'll be curious to see whether we see more speed from Villeneuve and from Olivier Panis, which we would attribute basically to those changes. The Honda engine upgrade that we were expecting to see here, which of course Jordan and BAR are using, that apparently is a bit of a disappointment. It was tested by Jordan last week, BAR have tested it as well, and in effect there was no change, which is very worrying for, I would think, BAR and Jordan.
Yes, and a surprise from Honda as well when you see how much success they've had over the years, but they just can't seem to get their engine program onto the same terms of Ferrari and BMW at the moment, and even of Mercedes, even though Mercedes perhaps haven't produced their best engine to date in Formula One. Honda definitely seem to be struggling. Down in there in the McLaren pit, David Coulthard having a good look down inside the cockpit of his McLaren, and I don't know quite what he's worried about. There's something perhaps not quite right down there, so making one or two little adjustments.
Well, it'd be unusual if McLaren didn't produce a car absolutely ready for David to jump into, but maybe something has been changed, and of course installation of all the electronics in the car is a major part of the packaging, and quite often maybe there's a rerouting of some of the electronics, or maybe some hydraulics that have been just rerouted around the cockpit. I don't know what it is, I'm just trying to second guess it, but David sort of pointing that out to some of his engineers and wandering away to the back of the garage as we look in at Pat Fry, who is David's race engineer, and of course Ron Dennis, and they've both sort of seemingly recovered pretty well from Monaco 2 weeks ago.
Well, David's made his way to the back of the pit garage to speak to us. Matt Lorenzo is going to have a word with him.
Thanks, Ben. Yes, David, first belated congratulations on Monaco. I was saying earlier on that your face was an absolute picture when you got out of that car. How good did it feel?
Well, my face told you that. It was felt fantastic. Obviously, been a year since I'd won a Grand Prix, and we started the season not really looking that competitive, but Monaco, I'd felt confident all weekend. I'd laid my kilt out for the black tie gala dinner on Sunday night on the Thursday in preparation for joining Prince Albert there. That's how confident I was that I could win that one.
Brilliant. Well, and what about just a few moments ago when you got out of the car? Was there a major problem there?
No, not at all. I was told that I had an interview to do with you guys, so that obviously takes priority over doing laps on the circuit.
I'm glad you got your priorities right, David. Good luck, and thanks for joining us.
So,
Thank you.
David Coulthard getting ready to come back out in this first session of free practice. We're taking a look on board at the moment with Malaysian driver Alex Young in the second of the Minardis. Minardi news again. Again, they've had to lay off some people. Financial worries particularly for this team. And in fact, I noticed that they've signed up a new test driver, presumably to try and help bring in a little bit of money. A Slovakian driver, 35-year-old, who's actually a parliamentarian in Slovakia, being brought in as test driver. Really, you have to consider it's more the financial input that's more important perhaps than his engineering feedback.
Yes, and in fact Giancarlo Minardi said that he will be doing aerodynamic testing, which means just literally driving up and down straights and being consistent and just monitoring how aerodynamics work on the racetrack or on the circuit, and if it aligns with what you get in a wind tunnel. But nevertheless, he is paying no doubt for that privilege, and probably paying very heavily. But there is a lot of money available in the Czech and Slovak republics these days, and of course they're very keen to project into Formula One. You've got a great track in Brno in the Czech Republic, a circuit that would be no doubt ideal for a Grand Prix World Championship status somewhere in the future.
Yeah, well, that would be quite something, and it's good to see drivers coming from all different parts of the globe to be involved in Formula One. Of course, Alex Young, the first Malaysian driver in recent times anyway, in modern World Championship terms, and although he might not be a superstar Formula One driver, he's still doing the job and keeping money coming into the Minardi team this year, which is absolutely crucial. A number of drivers not rushing to get out on circuit at the moment. Michael Schumacher and Montoya, neither of them have actually been on track. Everybody else has been out to do one installation lap, and Alex Young in fact has completed more laps than anybody else and is therefore fastest so far.
Well, Alex Young just running himself into the lap, but we'll catch up with him a bit later, no doubt.
Very quiet out there at the moment. Michael looking very relaxed. While there's not much happening, let's go and hear now from David Richards, who's just been speaking to Nick Damon.
New car, the basic structures are all the same, the monocoque, the crash structures and everything, but as you can see, the bodywork's radically different. It's a different way of cooling the car over through the, rather than out venting out through the sides, now it vents out through the top, and we've also accommodated new gearbox as well, new gearbox layout to change the clutch, which has been one of our Achilles heels this year. So it revolves around that, so it extends the length of the car a little bit at the same time. A whole range of things. Hopefully it all add up to a little improved performance.
Define a little.
Say again?
Define a little. A second, a lap?
0.3 of a second maybe.
A lot of work lot of work for 310s. You were hoping for the new Honda engine, which I understand is not coming. Is that right?
Well, it's the Honda engines are refinements of refinements of refinements. The actual new, completely new engine, no, it's not here, but we've got sort of further improvements all around the line here.
David, best luck weekend, please.
So we'll be keeping a close eye on the progress of that BAR Honda this weekend. We're looking at Felipe Massa on track, another track for him to learn, John. As a new driver coming to this track, what's he really got to concentrate? What's he looking for here?
Well, he's got to really sort out the braking zones. That's the most important part of this circuit. And very easy to outbrake yourself. The track, of course, still very green, but nonetheless, it is a circuit where you have to use the brakes very, very effectively indeed. And then, of course, discover where you're going to put the power down. And, of course, track in these conditions, you'll find the car moving around a lot more. It'll slide. All four wheels will slide. Nevertheless, Felipe Massa pretty much on the pace, already doing a 1:27.8 against Alec Young's 1:26. But expect Felipe Massa to suddenly, well, he's 3.3 seconds quicker at this point. That's intermediate section of the circuit. That's just down at the revised hairpin bend. So we're going to see a time from Felipe Massa, probably about a 1:22 by the time he returns back onto start, finish straight. And coming down, this is the fastest part of the track, probably even now doing close to 200 miles an hour.
And the neck taking a lot of forward and backward strain here with the very heavy braking areas that they're involved in. Coming out of that final corner where the wall's been moved back slightly and there's a new tyre barrier there you are. Well, he's faster by nearly 5 seconds over Alex Young. A huge margin as Felipe Massa gets used to another track. And here's another man who's got to learn it. It's Alan McNish. He's raced a lot in North America in sports car racing, both in Canada and in the United States, but he's never actually raced this Montreal track.
But it's not a particularly difficult circuit in terms of its technical input. It's all about braking and acceleration. But once you determine the braking zones, then it's just a matter of refining the whole thing all the way through the period of this 1 hour session. The thing not to get trapped is to start making car changes too rapidly. People start to chase the track, which is the worst thing you can do on a temporary racetrack like the Circuit Gilles Villeneuve. You just basically go out, do your runs, stick to the fundamental program that you have, let the track come to you.
So Alan McNish getting used to the track, making the early use of these laps just to get a feel for everything that's happening at the moment. Now, we've seen some good performances in just a few recent races by Giancarlo Fisichella, finally getting some points on the board for Jordan after they had a very poor start to the season in their terms. Now, he's always gone well at this track in Canada, seems to love the place. We caught up with him just a few moments ago.
Giancarlo Fisichella looking very relaxed this morning. Those extra 2 points in Monaco must have given you a boost.
Yeah, I'm confident. I feel well because I did great results in Monaco and in Austria, and I'm looking forward for this weekend because I did very well in the past year. I went 4 times on the podium, so I'm confident. We'll see.
Now, I believe Honda were due to bring an upgrade of an engine here, but they haven't. How much will that affect you?
Well, I was very pleased about the Step 2 engine. To have a better power here was very good for me, but unfortunately we cannot use it because in Silverstone testing we had some problem with the drivability, and even the power doesn't look enough compared to this one, so we need to wait next race and then we'll see.
Finally, what do you think of the changes to the circuit this year?
Sorry?
What do you think to the changes to the circuit this year?
I just done one installation lap and it's too early to say, but it looks a little bit safer.
Best of luck, thanks.
So Giancarlo Fisichella confirming what you said then, John, about not really seeing a lot of extra power from that new Honda engine. Still work to be done. We're riding on board here with Pedro de la Rosa in the Jaguar, and getting a good view just over his left shoulder of the layout of this track.
Yeah, it's just interesting listening to Fisichella, how candid he was about the development of that Honda engine. If that was a McLaren, Mercedes-Benz driver, or maybe even a Williams or a Ferrari driver, you'd have a much more guarded opinion. Drivers today in the top teams are under very strict confidentiality contracts not to discuss technical issues with the media. And dear old Giancarlo just blurts it all out, tells the world, straightforward, good guy, great little racing driver, and hopefully he and Jordan will have a good race here this weekend.
Let's hope so, yes. Let's just ride with Pedro de la Rosa coming through the last corner. That's where the wall's been moved back a little bit. And there hasn't an awful lot of room to play with, but they have moved it back just a touch there. Across the line for him, he goes 5th fastest. The two Saubers are currently fastest, so the Bridgestone tyres working well at the moment. Mark Webber actually has gone 3rd fastest in the Michelin with the Minardi car, and so that's a good effort from Webber, also learning this track this weekend. He did visit the track last year as a guest of Renault. Test driver last year, remember, for Benetton Renault as it was, and came along to have a look at the place, but wasn't in the race. Jacques Villeneuve now getting his first real run in this revised BAR Honda.
Yes, and the car which basically is looking more like a Williams, but in fact, interestingly, last week in a magazine, the story about how Formula 1 may evolve, develop, and if you painted that car in Williams colours or you painted a Jordan in, say, Ferrari colours, would anybody actually know the difference?
It would be quite hard to tell, but certainly we like to have a look at all the little intricate details as we look around the pit garages on our interactive coverage here. And of course, don't forget, you can always just stay in the pits if you want to and have a look at what's going on. Panel number 7. You'll be able to just stay in the pits, have a good look at the cars on this first day of free practice, where everybody's just getting themselves tuned in to the track for the first time.
Ben, also weather forecast is wet for qualifying, so I think what we're seeing, a lot of teams really getting stuck in very quickly to their work schedule, and right now Ralf Schumacher out in circuit quickest of 1st and 2nd sectors, and Ralf Schumacher really and BMW want to establish very quickly. As we have a look, well, Ralf just gets it all wrong. That's into the final sequence of rights left onto pit straight, and that's the revised run-off area. Oh, and there looking again at Ralf Schumacher. Now that's, I'm not sure what that was, the rerun was of a previous lap. Ralf Schumacher has gone quickest, in fact, 1:19.325, and you can see just how much he's throwing the car around. This is the beginning of his 5th, and I think the difference between this year and last year is that the level of performance that both tyre companies are now working at. The cars, drivers are going to see a lot more grip coming from the tyres, and I would expect to see times very quickly getting down to lower levels at the end of this session than we might have seen, for example, 1 year ago.
Well, Ralf, I'm sure, feeling confident coming back to Montreal, hoping he'll be able to repeat the victory that he took here last year, beating brother Michael, making it a 1-2 for the Schumacher family. Fastest in this session so far, with the slightly revised Williams, as we were talking about. Still very much the same car. It's not a B specification car that they have been talking about producing later in the year, but nonetheless there have been a good number of aerodynamic revisions to this machine for this weekend, and Ralf Schumacher getting a chance to try it out in this form. Just right on board with Ralf Schumacher for a moment. This is coming down towards the last corner. This is very high speed, almost 200 miles an hour when they're fully up to speed here, and then through this chicane. And the curb there a little less aggressive on the outside. They have changed that slightly. That was what has caused some of the problems through that last corner in previous years.
So Ralf Schumacher fastest in 1st and 3rd sectors, and slightly off the pace by his previous best lap in that middle sector, as brother Michael just sits back and realises maybe once again this is going to be his principal competitor here this weekend, in a battle that occurred 1 year ago between the Schumacher brothers. I think the first time that the brothers, or any brothers for that matter, finished 1st and 2nd in a Grand Prix.
Yes, that's right, John, making history in the World Championship, and surprisingly in a way that they didn't get a 1-2 the other way around. First of all, you'd almost expect it to have been a Michael-Ralf 1-2, but it wasn't that way. The first ever 1-2 with these two, and with two brothers, was with Ralf ahead, and you can see that he's fired up to get out there and do a number of laps early on in this session. He's completed 5 laps so far, but brother Michael still to complete even an installation lap, so he's taking things very steady, knowing how dirty the track tends to be here on the opening day of free practice.
Again, looking at the RPM, up to almost 18,500 RPM as he comes down. This is, in fact, they're probably now just over 200 miles an hour in the case of Ralf Schumacher and BMW.
Yes, in fact, you're right, John. Just looking at the speed trap figures that we've got here, the fastest speed so far, 327 kilometers per hour. So indeed, that's about 204 miles per hour that they're coming down to that final chicane. So Giancarlo Fisichella on track now, and we heard about his confidence, about his great record here in the past. 4 times on the podium. Once when he's been driving for Jordan in the past, but 3 of them with Benetton. And this year back with Jordan, of course, and with some point-scoring results in the last few races, confident that he might be able to pull something else out of the bag. His teammate Takuma Sato needs to have a good weekend. He's been putting it in the wall just too often this year. Needs to settle down and hopefully get a result. Still hasn't scored any points himself this year.
No, and in fact, in the press conference yesterday, Fisichella saying that maybe he's just too aggressive, just attacking too strongly. He's so desperate to achieve for his team, but maybe he needs just to back off, think about it, consolidate, and then learn. He has to learn first before he can drive at the level of his teammate. And Giancarlo Fisichella, one of the most highly rated drivers in the field these days in Grand Prix.
Well, just remember how tough he made life for Jenson Button last year at Benetton Renault. Jenson Button had a very tough season and was really found it a bit of a shock to be up against Fisichella, I think, certainly in the early part of the season. Got his game together later on, but it really established in Button's mind how hard you have to push, and Fisichella was the man that showed him that. And you can see Fisichella trying quite hard even in these early laps.
Yes, he is. In fact, he's just demoted his own teammate down from he was actually 5th down to 6th. Takuma Sato doing a very good job in his first visit, just about a tenth and a half away from the time Fisichella. But you can see how just hard Fisichella threw the car into turn 1. But there's so much bite now with the aerodynamics, but particularly these tyres, that you can really lean very hard indeed on the rear of a car.
Turn and the rear tires slide a bit. But well, as that comes from the tyre, I think maybe slightly too high pressure for it now. Feels like they're overheating slightly.
Could see the mechanic with fire extinguisher there, just watching those front brake discs. We've seen fires on the front end of cars already this year, and as you said, brake temperatures getting so high around this track. It really is very hard on brakes. We're watching Michael Schumacher now, and Michael Schumacher has done his installation lap, and he's already beginning to push and setting fastest sector times.
Also, you could see a big plume of dust came up, indicating the track, while it may be quick, it is still actually very dusty, but Michael Schumacher is going to go quickest of all. He's got purples, which indicate on the data screen that's the fastest time by anybody in any session. So he's got fastest in first and second sectors. Juan Pablo Montoya also had fastest in that last sector. He's now completing his first lap, but that so far is marginally slower than Michael, who's going to go, well, 1:18 something, 18.3, almost a second faster than his brother.
So straight away, as soon as he hits the track, Michael Schumacher is fastest, and no great surprise there. You know, he has an amazing record of qualifying here. 6 poles in the last 8 races around this track, beaten on only those 2 occasions by British drivers. Damon Hill taking the pole position here back in 1996, and David Coulthard beating him to pole in 1998. But every other year going back to 1994, Michael Schumacher has been on pole position in Montreal.
And Ben, he's continuing this run. He's on his second flying lap, and once again he's gone fastest in that first sector. We have to wait until he comes down to this revised hairpin bend. That's turn 10 on this 15-turn circuit. No corner names, just turn numbers. Already showing a tenth of a second up in that first sector. Now let's have a look and see how much he can improve or reach that time.
Just taking a look at the replay here of Michael pushing the Ferrari hard. You know, this track, this was him running just a little bit wide. This track is a lot about direction change, and that's where the Ferrari has been consistently brilliant all season. It's that change from one side to the other. We saw it in Malaysia, we saw it in Imola, and it's going to have a chance here to show its prowess at direction change, because there's lots of them around here.
1:17.946. And what Ferrari have done, unlike other teams in the pit lane, is that they've focused more on the rear of the car to give that rear stability, and that applies to cornering but also to braking. It's so important, especially on a circuit like the Gilles Villeneuve, to have really good stability, because you're braking at a number of places from close to 200 miles an hour. Certainly this section of track now we're watching Juan Pablo Montoya, you're exceeding 200 miles an hour. So brake stability is a major feature, something that teams work very hard on the aerodynamics and brake balance to correct, and he got it all wrong.
He went a bit too fast that time. Notice on the speed trap, he's got the highest figure already. In fact, Juan Pablo Montoya, he's done a 328 kilometers per hour at the speed trap just before where he went wide there a second ago, and he was almost there again, 327.4 kilometers per hour as he went in that time. So Montoya just running a little bit wide. That's really his first try at putting in a quick lap. He's currently 4th fastest. He's done some 5 laps, and there is his teammate sitting in the pit lane. He's 3rd fastest behind both Ferraris.
Well, again, there's that kick of dust as they come down into the hairpin bend, turn 10. And again, you're watching, just trying to catch a glimpse of the brakes to see how hot they glow, and they will glow mightily here all weekend. Fortunately, that change at that final turn 15 enables Montoya to jump across, but of course if he did that in a race and maybe gained an advantage, that would be seen to be a penalty for Montoya. But in this session, unofficial, it doesn't matter, but doesn't want to be seen to be doing it too often. We might have to go in and see race director to explain his consistency if he got it wrong.
Both McLarens on track then. Look at the speed trap, 3:22, although Raikkonen still, even at that speed, breaks his braking too late and has to cut across.
Yeah, he threw the car in, lost grip as the car literally went sideways. He straightened it up. Of course, now the advantage is you can go across that simulated grass off part of track. Nevertheless, the young Finn trying very hard, and I think maybe for the first time realising just what a teammate he's got in David Coulthard. Raikkonen had a torrid time in the race, in the qualifying and practice sessions in Monte Carlo. Through no fault of his own, he got tagged by Rubens Barrichello, and from there on it didn't really happen for the young Finn. So he's keen to get back on terms with Coulthard, who is no doubt buoyed up by that brilliant win in the Principality of Monte Carlo.
Well, Rubens Barrichello, I'm sure, will be applying the pressure on his teammate Michael Schumacher again. Remember, in qualifying, a number of times this year, we've seen the battle between the two of them. And Rubens Barrichello coming out on top, of course, in Austria. But he had pushed him very hard before that as well at San Marino, when he had pole until the very last lap of the session. And perhaps this track will once again suit Rubens Barrichello, as he's still looking for his first win of the season. Now, let's take a look here at David Coulthard. Replay, what did he get up to? Was he braking a little bit late, missed the apex? Ooh, and went across the grass, but I don't think that caused too many problems. He was able to drive straight back onto the track, and no damage done.
Yeah, that's up at turns 3 and 4, a favourite place to... You turn in again, it's an indication of just how slippery the track is. You feel you've got the grip, you just push that next lap that little bit further, and then the car just drifts away. David missed the apex, and the whole car just was sliding in a 4-wheel slide. But interestingly, Ben, everybody, but particularly those at the front, are about a second a lap faster than this corresponding time last year. Now, maybe that small revision down at turn 10 at the hairpin bend, the track is marginally shorter, but I think that in principle it's all about grip and tyres. And Michael Schumacher right now back out for his second run of the day is again fastest through those first 2 sectors. He's got purples in both, so 1:17.946. We expect to see that being eclipsed very shortly indeed, and Michael Schumacher just coming down to turns 14 and 15. That's the flick left and right, and just balance the car and steering and throttle, kicks up the dust. Now he's pushing hard to that 1:16 something, 1:17, no, well, only 24 thousandths of a second. It would look much better. He must have lost time. In fact, looking at the screen, he lost about 3/10 over what was the best option time. So just shows you how easy it is, even at that level, to get it marginally wrong.
Friday is the day they experiment with different tyre compounds as well, in particular. Remember, both Michelin and Bridgestone bringing 2 different types of tyre to each and every race, and on the Friday they have to run both types. And usually they will make their decisions on the Friday as to what they will run the rest of the weekend, although sometimes they don't get it. Look how wide Schumacher was just now.
Well, I tell you what, he didn't leave any gap between the wall and the car. You can see the whole car, just that 4-wheel slide, drift, you might like to call it. Again, an indication of don't believe the track is giving you grip. You've got to feel your way through, and it's very easy to be beguiled into believing there's more grip there than there is.
Interesting, I was looking at Cristiano de Mata's comments. A little bit of team radio with Jaguar there. Eddie Irvine just talking a little bit about what's going on, but a bit hard to work out what that was all about.
Ben, I have to say I'm very familiar with that. Sometimes too much information is more confusing than not enough, and I think that was a case of Eddie not really knowing what was going on, but he does know, he knows exactly what's going on, but it's being selective in the information that you give the team. It's a low grip circuit anyway, I mean, we know that, and as I said at the beginning of this 1 hour session, don't sucker for trying to change the car too quickly. Now Eddie's been guilty of that because he's desperate to get the Jaguar competitive, and he wants to be as quick as he can, but you know, he's going to have to wait until the track comes a little bit more rubber down, and certainly the bits of track we've seen already, quite large plumes of dust being kicked up, I must say, on the quicker parts, but nevertheless, even here into turn 2, you turn in Ralf Schumacher, you can see how much he's struggling to get the front to bite, to hold that curbing all the way around.
Looking at Felipe Massa hustling the Sauber. I was just going to talk about Cristiano Di Matta's comments after testing the Toyota at Paul Ricard. Some comments in Autosport this week. What interested me about those comments, John, was that he was Massa going far too quick into the first corner,
and
manages
again,
to save it.
They've got some of that high grip tarmac also there. They're taking away the grass. Also another area of track, especially at the start of the race, where there can be problems. So if you can just make that area safer overall, well, there's a replay, and let's watch what happens. Massa just comes in just a little bit late in the brakes, momentary lock up on the unloaded inside wheel. He decides, well, let's just go straight on. You can see already rubber, gathering just offline, so he just simply drives across that tarmac and rejoins track. And here's the onboard view.
Yeah, let's just take a look from the onboard camera. You can see that left front locking up, comes off the brakes, just drives across the runoff, and that's get back on. Talking about the tyres, Di Matta's comments were saying that in fact when you do lock up with a Formula 1 car, he found it actually easier to judge the braking than with a Champ car. And that's interesting to me, because certainly a few years ago when Champ car drivers were coming over to Formula 1, they found the groove tyres very difficult to deal with, very inconsistent. It sort of said to me, reading those comments, how much progress the tyre manufacturers have made in the last couple of years, that a Champ car driver actually finds it more progressive now in a car with groove tyres.
Well, I think you've said it, because the development and the stability that have now been built. Just watching something just in front of Benoli's car fell on the track, but there's so much improvement in terms of the tread stability. When you put 4 grooves into a tyre, or 3 grooves depending, what you do is just you make the tread surface inherently unstable. How do you get that back? Well, that's a secret both tyre companies really will never ever give away. And the difference between a slick that would be used in the States, for example, in their domestic series, and what we use in Formula 1 worldwide is now probably very, very little difference.
Yeah, fascinating, and it just shows you how much progress has been made in this tyre war that's going on between Michelin and Bridgestone. Cristiano Di Matta currently driving in America, but a useful test for him with Toyota just last week.
You're just watching Benoli there as he was slightly on. I wasn't quite sure whether that Montoya, whether he's going to pull straight back out on track or not, or well, we don't know. Alex Works become a dad. We mentioned that not in Monaco, didn't we?
Yes, he's a father now, which is great news. Third driver for McLaren, of course, and always present to see what progress is being made. Hoping that the few changes that have been made this weekend to the McLaren, a bit more power, but looking at the times at the moment, Coulthard is 6th fastest, Kimi Raikkonen down in 8th, and that's really what we would expect. They're not likely to be challenging up front this weekend.
And so far, it's good news for Jacques Villeneuve. He's currently in 7th place, and well, he will look forward to some improvement in that car, both in terms of performance and reliability. And just thinking back 1 year ago, he started this race from the 5th row of the grid alongside Juan Pablo Montoya, and but unfortunately it wasn't quite as good a race for Jacques Villeneuve, because he retired with a half-shaft failure, something again, mechanical reliability that has dogged to a large degree the history of the BAR team.
That's right. Well, Jordan have had their own reliability issues this year, although they seem to have got a lot of those problems sorted out, although there's some concerned faces down there in the pit at the moment. Takuma Sato sitting in pit lane, still needing to learn and get some laps in, and currently he's 15th, having done 9 laps.
So Jordan, maybe I think just holding Sato back, letting Fisichella do the bulk of the work. Fisichella now down to 11th place on a 1:20.0, and Sato down in 15th on a 1:20.6, only just 0.6 of a second between them, which is actually a very small amount of time considering it's Sato's first visit. But maybe the team also just concerned that Sato wants to go too quickly too soon once again. And Eddie Jordan saying that it's cost his company £1 million, dollars, punts, whatever he talks about these days. It's a million or something anyway. And you know, it's money that hurts a team, not only in terms of the cash outlay, but also its time. And of course then it reflects on how the development for new components gets set back, which you're having to constantly replace the parts that are being damaged. And you know, it's a familiar scenario for teams, particularly those teams that are not as well structured as the likes of Williams, McLaren or Ferrari.
Montoya again with the highest speed trap figure. Look at that, 328.7 kilometers per hour. So we're almost at the 205, well we are, 205 miles per hour before he gets onto the brakes there, into that final chicane. And Montoya now third fastest, so he had a couple of good sectors there, but he's still about half a second off Michael Schumacher's best time. So Giancarlo Fisichella studies those times and looking at the behaviour of the cars out there, no doubt, as well. Giancarlo himself currently down in 15th position. He's only completed some 8 laps. Again, he's in no particular rush. He knows this track as well as anybody. He's raced here with a great deal of success, and it's more a question of waiting for that track to clean up before they can really make any good changes to the car that will help him in qualifying tomorrow.
Jarno Trulli doing a very good job, 5th quickest for Renault, and Renault becoming a bigger threat to McLaren than McLaren maybe anticipated at the beginning of the year, but now admitting that they're going to have to watch, because Renault clearly with the development of this very wide angle engine is moving forward, and McLaren really believing they're going to have to wait until later in the year before they can get something substantial from Mercedes-Benz. And it's just making the life of the Woking-based team even more uncomfortable. And you know, opportunities like Monaco don't come too often. Probably the next one that they can say will work to their advantages will not be until August when we go to Hungary for their Grand Prix.
Truly coming out of that slightly revised hairpin. They've resurfaced it down there as well. It makes me wonder whether there's not more grip anyway around that hairpin. Might be part of the reason we're seeing some pretty rapid times for a Friday being set here. Now through the last corner, close out to the wall there. And we could still see a few cars hitting that wall in the Grand Prix itself come Sunday. Good time from Trulli. He goes 4th fastest. So we've got the 2 Ferraris fastest at the moment. Montoya 3rd, Trulli now 4th, ahead then of the Sauber of Nick Heidfeld.
But sadly for Jenson Button, he's only done 3 laps, of which I think most have been in and out installation laps. Hasn't recorded a time. It's not important today, but it's lost track time. And any driver will be very unhappy sitting in the pits with a technical problem. I'm sure that this is not just Button sitting it out, waiting for the track to come to them. They've got a problem, and we'll try and get to the bottom of that one at some point in this session. Beautiful weather conditions in Montreal, and often it can be very, very hot indeed here for the Grand Prix weekend. You're watching Heinz-Harald Frentzen in the Arrows, and this is a good lap from Frentzen coming up. Let's see. Yes, it puts him in 6th position. And this is a car and a team and a driver that I think could be a surprise this weekend. It's a super little car. It's traditionally quick in a straight line, though looking at the top speeds it was well down on the Williams, but again that depends on how much downforce the team may have at this point. When the track is very green as it is, they probably might run slightly more downforce. As the track picks up grip, then they can afford to take that downforce off. But look, 0.08 of a second down on Michael Schumacher's first sector time. So watch Arrows and Frentzen this weekend. Definitely, and he's made the comment that he feels that he's not just driving as well as ever, but better than ever. And that's saying quite something, because Frentzen's always been one of the stars in Formula One. First of all with Sauber, and then he had a great opportunity with Williams, which never quite clicked, and then some great performances with Jordan. Now with Arrows, look at this. It's this lap at the moment could be good enough to put him ahead of Rubens Barrichello in 2nd. Well, the most important thing for Heinz-Harald Frentzen is to feel happy, to be in a team where he feels loved and at all, you know, is friendly. He's not so comfortable in a team like Williams as we saw during his 2-year stint there. But watch Frentzen, this is 4th, well he's currently 6th now. He should go up to the top 3. So across the line for Frentzen, and that puts him 2nd indeed. So does this mean good news for the Bridgestone runners, I wonder? Because of course Arrows, one of those Bridgestone teams, and that puts Frentzen up into 2nd, which is slightly higher than you might expect for the Arrows. Might indicate that at least on this first day the Bridgestone tyre in very good shape. Certainly with the track conditions as they are. Now there, is that the new owner of Jordan speaking to the current owner of Jordan? Craig Pollock, again on the rumour mill, has been in discussions with Eddie Jordan, and I understand with the Arrows team. Now, I'm sure that's maybe me being mischievous, but there are substantive rumours that Craig Pollock is in discussions with the possibility of becoming involved in Jordan as well as in Arrows. Maybe he's going to take over 2 teams, I don't know, but that was one of the rumours that was going around post Monaco, and little vignettes, little glimpses like that just give us insight into what's going on. Eddie Jordan, of course, will deny it.
Juan Pablo's dad keeping an eye on proceedings within the Williams pit, and Juan Pablo himself currently 4th fastest. 9 laps he's completed so far. The most laps so far have been completed by Olivier Panis and Felipe Massa. Both have racked up some 18 laps.
-5 front, -2 both rears.
And a few changes being made to the car. That's Juan Pablo watches on. A very competitive kart racer himself. Long career racing karts, and of course that's how Juan Pablo started his own racing career, and now occasionally they both get out on karts and enjoy themselves, despite Montoya being so busy with his Formula 1 commitments. He was involved in doing some work for a commercial in the UK this week before flying out to Canada, so he didn't get a lot of time to spend in Montreal. Oldie off at turn number 6.
Between 6 and 7 now, whether he's just pulled off or whether that's a spin. There are waved yellow flags, and that's just a hazard to the drivers. We wait and see the replay for that. It may be something as simple as a mechanical problem, or it may just have been maybe being a little bit too keen, looking for too much performance too soon. So Enrique Benoldi just about to get out of the car, and of course he has to replace the steering wheel, and then the car can be pushed to safety behind the barriers. Well, let's look and see what happens turning into turn 6, and that looks to me a mechanical problem. Just suddenly as if all power has just suddenly somebody switched the lights out, and that's it for Benoldi for this session.
He seems to be suffering all the bad luck at the moment, doesn't he, John? Reliability wise, Monaco, he had an engine give up on him as well in practice, and it just seems to be denying him the chance to get decent number of laps in. It's
a frustration that sometimes in a smaller team it seems that you do get this, let's say, irregularity of reliability, whereas you look at the teams, Ferrari again, McLaren and Williams, they are able to run 2 cars at the maximum of their machinery and the maximum performance. Michael Schumacher on board with, he was fastest once again in Sector 1, but suddenly backed out of it fairly substantially in Sector 2, and that was of course for Benoldi, and now begins that process all again. A good clean exit as he comes out of turns 15, 14 and 15. We'll watch again that first sector, 21.8 seconds. So Michael Schumacher frustrated by that yellow flag situation. It's still a yellow flag situation, so the marshals have not been able to remove Benoldi's car quickly enough, and that may mean what they call over here a wrecker. In other words, a tow truck may be required to come on track and get that car pulled to safety.
So Jenson Button sitting in the pits at the moment, waiting to come back out for another run. And Michael Schumacher continues his way around, fastest again on that first sector, coming up behind Felipe Massa as they come up towards turns 8 and 9, another of these chicanes, and now building up the speed again, coming towards the hairpin at the far end of the circuit. Let's just take a look here, replay with Michael Schumacher through this flat-out sweeping right-hander. Now, what was going on here? Did we see anything spectacular? Bit of it
was the flags taken in, you see.
Yeah, that was up into turns 6, and he's annoyed that the yellows are still out there because it's messing up his chance to put in some quick laps.
Well, it's not up to Michael Schumacher to decide what should or should not happen on the track. It's up to the race director, and if he feels that the situation is such and that car is in a dangerous position until it's removed to safety, then the flags and the lights will remain on. And Michael, well, he's decided to come in, and in fact he's done the right thing. He can vent his frustration in the pit lane instead of trying to carry on the circuit, and just realise that, well, what am I going to do? I'm out here doing nothing, I can't gain anything, I can't gain a lap. So that's what we had planned to do.
So Ross Brawn will just be keeping him cool and saying, well, don't worry, we'll get another run in. We've got time, still 11 minutes to go in this first hour of free practice, another hour coming up. This was where the yellows were still being shown, and Michael waving the signal saying, get rid of those, we don't need those, I've already come past this car once, I know where it is, I don't need to be warned about it. But of course what he doesn't know is there might still be marshals out there attending to it, so seems a little unnecessary for him to start waving around at this point.
I think that, that sort of action, he would say, I was acknowledging it, I was putting my hand out to say I've seen it, but I suspect it was also out of frustration. Somebody who also is feeling frustrated but has actually gone back out on track is Jenson Button. Now, we went down to the pit lane and asked Renault what the problem was, and they said, we're not telling you.
Well, that's a shame for Jenson Button. He has only completed 4 laps. He's on track now, I'm glad to see. So that's good news. Hopefully they've sorted it out, whatever it was. David Coulthard's using the curbs there, and just the back end of the McLaren gets a little out of shape, but he keeps it all together and comes across the line. But currently staying down in 10th position, knowing that this weekend is not likely to bring the success that 2 weeks ago did in Monaco.
And you would assume that Coulthard, at the pace he's running at, is about just over 2 seconds off, has got a fair amount of fuel on board, as Olivier Panis, having a run in his revised BAR, comes back into the pits. Olivier Panis.
10-4, stop in your box.
Just the team telling him to come and stop in the box, then probably do a quick little start.
Good time he set though, John. 3rd fastest in that BAR Honda, so that's encouraging for them.
It is encouraging. It's an 18.349, about 0.4 of a second slower than Michael Schumacher, compared to teammate Villeneuve, 120.037.
He's not winning. He's quite constant. And with the car, one thing I feel we need to improve is the braking stability, because particularly in the last chicane, the car, I'm not really confident to brake late and turn in quickly, because all the time I feel the rear is a little bit light. I think maybe we need to put a little bit...
Oh, we lost what he wanted to suggest there.
But then I was going to say, Olivier Panis confirming what we were suggesting, that back-end stability is key. Now, instead of maybe looking at the Williams, as Jeff Willis has done, and say that's the direction I want to go, maybe he should have walked down the pit lane and looked at the Ferrari, because I believe that the Ferrari has got the best back-end stability of any Grand Prix car currently racing.
Well, maybe that's the case, but certainly that 3rd place, or now it's 4th in fact, because Fisichella's just gone 2nd fastest, so good effort from the Italian. And Jenson Button now beginning to put in some decent laps. He's gone 11th fastest. But nonetheless, 4th place now for Olivier Panis. That must be encouraging as they try out all the new bits and pieces on that BAR Honda. Let's ride with Button here.
Just watch the turn in. Well, he got a bit of oversteer on the under brakes. Again, back end stability. Picks up speed. Again, you see the back end of the car starting to drift away and having to put corrective lock on.
It's a little bit like Trulli was saying, wasn't it, on the radio earlier on? The front end's got so much grip that the back end is not keeping up with it.
Yes, I mean, that's a case for me. I would bring it in, lower the back end down to try and level out the car, make sure that and that's done, as David down at the hairpin bend, just to flatten the car out and bring the centre of pressure slightly further back, which would give you confidence to flick the car in. We saw Button trying to flick the car in, but Fisichella doing a very strong job indeed for Jordan.
Great through that last corner, wasn't he? Looked fantastic. And Fisichella, third fastest. He's been displaced by Barrichello and Michael Schumacher. Both of them have been putting in some quick laps, and Michael is now in the 1:16s, and he's on a faster lap now as well.
And Ben, pole position last year was 1:15.782. He's 1.2 seconds away. Oh, did he hit the wall? He did. He flicked the wall. Yes, he hit the wall on the exit. He damaged the right rear suspension, and now Michael Schumacher's efforts to pull even quicker have demeaned. Well, we've got 6.5 minutes remaining. Michael clipped the wall with the right rear. I thought he did it. I couldn't tell then. Suddenly the car, I bet you one of those toe links or something in the rear suspension has been damaged by that, and he's backed out of it, and he's going to make his way back to the pits. Look under the right-hand corner of that car. We might see what it was.
Well, typical Schumacher. He's always absolutely 100% commitment, and right out to the edge, just clipping the wall. And no matter how well balanced that Ferrari is, if you try and carry too much speed, it just drifts out that little bit too far. But typical Schumacher, absolutely flat out. He's fastest already by half a second. That lap was a definite improvement if he had made it through this last bit.
Yes, oh, did he ever clip? He smacked it big time. Watch the... Oh, there she goes.
Almost took our camera out, not quite, and pretty effective. It looks as though there might be damage front and rear on that one.
I would say he's clipped the front, but definitely damaged. I mean, look, he hit it pretty square on with the wheel, but you can see the car, there's a slight tilt in the car, tilting a little bit to the right, and while it doesn't appear to have actually broken any of the components, no doubt maybe some of the joints, because those are probably carbon fibre suspension components, but the end of each component has got a titanium joint in it, and maybe one of those has been bent, but clearly quite a slap into that wall, and nothing like an early morning wake-up call for the boys on Friday morning.
That's right, and of course an accident like that, John, or not accident, but contact like that can often put loads into the gearbox, for example, that it's not expecting, and problems that can resurface later on in the weekend.
Well, that's for sure. That's for sure, but nevertheless, Michael Schumacher is happy that knowing there's only 5 minutes remaining, he is quickest by half a second from his teammate, and of course Rubens can carry out or continue with the work that Michael might have been doing, and and Felipe Massa also. Well, I mean, you expect it from Felipe Massa. He goes to the limit, then comes back, whereas other drivers tend to creep up to it. He seeks the limit, then realises, well, that's too much. Just go back by a millimetre or whatever it happens to be.
Yes, locked up there, but managed to guide it through the first couple of corners safely. Ross Brawn waiting for Michael to make it back into the pits. He's not made it back to the pit lane as yet, but he's crawling around fairly slowly. There he is, just hoping to make it back into the pit so they can work on this car and hopefully get him back out for the second session of free practice, just the 1 hour in between, and there may be a fair bit of work for the boys to do there to get him back out for the second session.
Well, they'll take that car in, it'll be straight up on the stands, and all those parts will be stripped off. They've got complete sets of components to put onto the car. They won't bother even trying to repair it, but they will look around the gearbox, particularly where the components on the gearbox side, the suspension mounts, as Nick Heidfeld gets it all wrong up at turns 3 and 4 as well.
Yeah, so Heidfeld running off the track, and 1 or 2 people on.
In fact, that was on at 8 and 9, sorry.
Yeah, a little further round, but number of people on reasonably quick laps at the moment. Barrichello might improve slightly. I don't think he's going to beat the time that's been set by Michael Schumacher. Fisichella's currently 3rd. Raikkonen's popped up to 4th now, so that's a good effort, and Frentzen 5th.
Yes, Heinz-Harald Frentzen, well, he was on a good lap up until that last sector, and he backed off, and in fact he's gone to 125, but Frentzen still in the top 6 comfortably, but Olivier Panis now just behind him by 9,000ths of a second. So BAR have done a good job. That work, revised bodywork, clearly. Now Ferrari do not want us to see that. You can see the front probably not so severe, but it's hard to tell. There's a bow on that wheel. These wheels very light, and they don't get used very often. They've got a very limited life.
It's great to see the paint on the sidewall of the tyre, though, isn't it? You don't often see that on Michael Schumacher's car, but a lot of green paint on the side. Oh, and Frentzen's gone off.
Yes, again, that's down at turns 8 and 9. Just you come onto the bridge, just bumpy there. Oh, Heinz, you've done it all wrong. Now keep the engine running. Oh, and Rubens is very happy about that. Barrichello, his lap compromised. Frentzen has a second bite at the cherry, and this time gets it.
Left. Just clean the tyres back up and keep going.
So he's been asked to stay out there and continue on rounds as he gets back up to speed. But that certainly caused a few problems for a number of other drivers.
Pretty much different than before. Don't know if you've seen it correctly, but I have trouble.
He's not happy with whatever the last change that they made to the car, and he's effectively saying that's what caused me to spin. You come down into turns 8, it's very bumpy under the bridge, and then you quick flick right then left. He's coming into the pits, whatever the team's saying.
Yes, and he's obviously not happy with that. I'm not sure if he was talking about whether the brakes had been bled, something like that I think he was talking about. So we'll wait and see if he comes back around again. Yes, he has stayed out on track, in fact. So a lot of cars on track currently, 19 cars on track. That's a replay of Frentzen going off. Only 2 cars in the pits, and of course we've got the one car which is stuck out there. That's Ben Oldie's car, and Frentzen certainly had some fun and games trying to get back onto the track, and wave of apology there to Barrichello.
Yeah, I mean, it's to do these donuts to try and spin the car around on its axis, and you've got to be very quick on the throttle and on the clutch to make sure you don't do what Frentzen did and over-egg the pudding and waste time, but more importantly frustrate other drivers. And in fact, you know, Barrichello coming round, okay, yellow flag situation, but sometimes drivers don't always pay enough attention.
So looking at David Coulthard, doesn't look as though he's trying particularly hard on this lap with just a minute to go. Currently running 4th fastest, so there has been an improvement there. He's just gone ahead, he's fastest Michelin runner in fact, David Coulthard. Bridgestone's 1, 2, 3 currently, courtesy of Ferrari and Jordan. Then the 2 Michelin runners, here we are, Coulthard and Raikkonen. And then we're back to Bridgestone again for Frentzen, Panis, Massa. The next Michelin runner is Montoya in 9th position. So, and Barrichello's just gone fastest. Barrichello fastest by just 0.06 of a second.
Well, I have to say, it's no surprise. Barrichello has been absolutely blinding since he's got the 2002 car. Ross just being distracted by the news that Rubens is quickest. It's a very small improvement over Michael's time. Nevertheless, it's good that Ferrari can continue at this level. Michael's car back in the garage. We've got just under 15 seconds or so of the session remaining, and Rubens will not be able to compete another flying lap. He'll come across start finish line, take the flag, and then we'll be back in for an hour of technical meetings, discussions and chats, and then decide where they want to go. I suspect they'll probably start off where they finished this session, and a lot of the work will be focused on the tyre choice. But look at the understeer that Barrichello had coming into turn 10, well offline on the entry, turned in very late. Oh, and there's a McLaren, and it's Coulthard.
Yeah, David Coulthard's gone off onto the gravel. That's up at turn 6, and that's the corner where we saw Ben Oldie put off earlier, but that was a mechanical problem. This time Coulthard makes a little mistake under braking, I would think. Let's take another look here.
Yeah, he gets the wheels on that white line, brakes heavily. There's not much grip on the white lines here. Of course, they'll be more dusty than the racetrack, and of course the track at that point is Frentzen down at turn 10. Has another spin, and he's not going to be very happy with those last changes to his arrows.
Well, it's funny, they've all been behaving. Good lap coming up from Fisichella. Let's see where this puts him. Well, it keeps him 3rd behind the 2 Ferraris, but another good lap, 17.840. That was an improvement in time, and he's just under a second slower than Michael Schumacher in 2nd place. Coulthard
I'd have to repeat, Robert,
behind him. Let's take a look back. This was Frentzen, I think, coming into the casino hairpin.
Yeah, it looks like the rear brakes just drag the car around, and maybe that's what they've done. I mean, that's something a driver can, of course, adjust from the cockpit, but nevertheless, it looked to me like it was a rear brake, rear stability fact, and Frentzen back now in the pits. Quick car.
Well, just
the
have
arrows.
a problem. Once the brakes gets hotter, just have a over-braking effect just before I do stop the braking maneuver. Yeah? Towards the end of the braking, that's when the rear starts to bite very strongly, and I just lock up the rear. Just have a look where the temperatures are there.
Yeah, maybe now we're too hot on the rears and we're just pinching right at the end of the braking zone.
Good feedback there, John, and a very clear description from Frentzen as to what was going on throughout the braking area.
Yeah, sometimes not being English your first language, you actually are more precise and concise in your explanations. I mean, I know I fell victim of this on many occasions by being over analytical.
I can't imagine that you talked too much, John, did you?
No, it was something it's evolved, Ben, it's evolved. Nevertheless, you can give too much information, but the worst thing is that it's contradictory information, and that's what we thought Eddie was doing. He was trying to be helpful, but in fact he's probably actually confusing people more than helping them.
Well, Frentzen has a little bit of work to do with the team on getting those brake temperatures right. It's what you were talking about earlier on. Looking at the times from this first session, well, it's Friday, and the red bees are up there on the first page. We seem to have got used to this with Bridgestone going well, particularly on the Friday. But remember what happened in Monaco. Michelin's really did come back at them as we went through the weekend. Coulthard and Raikkonen fastest for Michelin. Montoya down in 9th. Good effort from De La Rosa to be 10th fastest in the Jaguar and 4th fastest Michelin runner. So he'll be pleased about that and hopes to see some more improvements over the course of the weekend. Behind De La Rosa, Jarno Trulli in the fastest of the Renaults, just ahead of Eddie Irvine in 12th. Nick Heidfeld, well, on Bridgestones, I'm a bit surprised to see the Saubers not better than they are on this occasion. He's down there in 13th position. Felipe Massa, 8th fastest, so perhaps Heidfeld just had a few problems in that session. Button, we know, had a few troubles. Salo and McNish for Toyota not showing particular turn of speed so far. And at the back of the moment, 2 drivers learning the track, Takuma Sato in the Jordan and Alex Young in the Minardi.
And Sato only got 15 laps, Young got 25 laps, so Sato I think being held back a little bit by the team.
Let's take a look at the highlights